We're speaking about where you're permitted to bring karbanos. And there, when you come to the land, you'll bring your burnt offerings, your meat offerings, and your Maisasheni, what you tithe, Veis Chumas Yedchem, and your Bikurim. Those are the new fruits, new grains, your vows, and the non-obligatory, consecrated sacrifices. The law is that when you eat kochim, when you eat sacrificial meat, it can only be eaten if it's kochim kalim, something that a non-Kohen is permitted to eat. You cannot eat outside the walls of Yerushalayim. So you will eat them there. And you will rejoice in all your endeavors, you and your families. So over here, in Posuk Zayin, there's a Sefarno, if you have the Migros Gados Chumash. Lefnei Hashem Elokechem usmachtem. Before God you will rejoice. Ivdu as Hashem b'simcha, kiroi l'chol ovid ba'avo. The Posuk says, Ivdu as Hashem b'simcha. You should serve Hashem with joy. So Sefarno says, l'chol ovid ba'avo. Anybody who serves God with love, when he serves him, he does it with joy. You know, many years ago, I heard from Rav Shvadron, Zech Tzarek Levrocha, Shalom Shabron, who is known as the Magdu Shalayim, who was the brother-in-law of Rav Shalom Zalman Auerbach, Zech Tzarek Levrocha. And he was a phenomenal Talmud Chochem, even more than that, Rav Shalom Shvadron, a tzaddik. And he told over a story, and he was a Maggid. So Maggid was able to literally, he had many theatrical skills. I used to say then, I heard him about 55 years ago, the first time I've ever heard him, maybe longer, and he came to Baltimore to raise money for Chinuch Atzmoi. First time he was ever outside of Israel. And he spoke normally in Yiddish, but when he gave over this particular story, he said it over in Hebrew. And the story was, this person goes to a very upscale restaurant in Yerushalayim. You realize 55, 60 years ago, there weren't many upscale restaurants in Yerushalayim. And he goes in, and he looks at the menu, and he orders the most expensive platter of fish on the menu. It cost, in those years, they didn't call it shekel chadash, it was called the lira. You paid with liros in those years, or they called them pounds. Because it wasn't much after the British had given over Palestine to become Israel to the Jews. And the waiter says to the patron, why are you ordering the most expensive platter of fish on the menu? He didn't say because I'm so wealthy. He says, because I love fish. I love fish. So he brings him this beautifully garnished platter of fish, and he has the cutlery on the table, and he begins mutilating the fish, literally. You couldn't believe that a moment ago you had this masterpiece of fish garnished. Second later, it was like disastrous. He mutilated it. So the waiter says to the customer, he says, but I thought you love fish. If you love fish, why are you mutilating the fish? Evidently, you don't love the fish, you love yourself, except you're indulging in the fish to satisfy your own desire. So over here, the Sefarno says, L'fnei Hashem Elokechem usmachtem, ivdu as Hashem b'simcha. You should serve God with joy. Now the question is, the person says, but I serve God, I put on my tefillin, I don't have any joy. I study Torah, I have no joy. I do many mitzvahs, I have no joy. The question is, why don't you have joy? So he explains the Sefarno, Kiroi l'chol ovid mi'ava. A person who serves Hashem out of love, when you come upon that moment, that opportunity, To serve him, you have joy. It's like you love someone and you're able to satisfy that person with to show your feeling towards him. Whatever you do, it's with joy, because this is something special. This is a special moment. So usmachtem fnei Hashem elokechem usmachtem. That's only because you can have an understanding of the value of their relationship, and therefore you do it out of joy. But that's an indication of somebody who's over Hashem misimcha. You serve God misimcha, you never feel you're lacking, no matter what. I remember many years ago, there was a person, he was one of the refuseniks. His name was Yosef Mendelovich. And he was released from Russia and he was imprisoned for many years because he was a refusenik. And they did all kinds of psychological torture on him. And to maintain his sanity, so when he was finally released, he came to the United States. So he came to Baltimore to speak. And he told of many of the stories when he was in prison. How did he celebrate Pesach? How did he do the mitzvah tzitzis? Many things. What did he do? Psychologically, to feel in touch and to maintain his sanity. So it was Pesach, he needed morah for the Seder. But everything was purely symbolic. So in the prison yard, there was some grass growing in some corner. He picked the grass, not that he ate the grass, but that was the morah for the Seder. Tzitzis, he found a few strands of string, and he attached them to a little rag. That represented his tzitzis. And when he had it, it gave him a sense of attachment to Hashem, and therefore, regardless of what they did to him, it didn't matter, because he felt connected. Because he felt connected, he felt he's going to survive this. And he did survive it eventually. And if every little thing, the matzah was a piece of cardboard. Not that he ate the cardboard, but everything was, as they say, everything's a state of mind. Two people experience the exact same thing, but it's a state of mind. A person who serves mi'ava, then it's l'fnei Hashem elokechem usmachtem. You don't serve mi'ava, and this is really what Rashi cited the Midrash in the first paragraph of the Shema, Asher noch mitzav chayom al vavecha. You beinecha kechadoshos. Moshe says, we say in the Shema, that I command you today. I mean, the Torah was given nearly 4,000 years ago. It's not today. You beinecha kechadoshos. When you engage in the Torah, it should be as if it was recently given. Why? Because you cannot compare a diyukma chadosha diyukma yishana, a new proclamation of the king, which people never heard of before. People are excited about it. Something which you've heard, people say, I've heard it before. Because he says, diyukma chadosha, something which is new, is special, you never tire of it. Because it's always, you always see it as special. Something that's old, you've heard before, it's just a question of time before you tire, and eventually you can abandon it. Therefore, the Torah, when we engage in Torah mitzvahs, it's hayom alav avecha. You should put it today, as if you received it today, being a diyuktma chadosha, a new proclamation. There's that excitement. When there's the excitement, therefore, but again, what is that? Why are you excited about it? You're excited because even the person who has that connection, if you don't see it as special, just a question of time before you're tired of it. As I always say, you push a boulder up a hill, up a mountain, it's not so simple. Eventually the boulder comes back to crush you. But if you don't see, you see you pushing it down the hill, you do it with ease. It's not a problem whatsoever. And therefore we find in the Tocha, which we're going to read not too far off, in Kisovo, what is the claim against Klal Yisrael? Asher vartem Shem Lokecha, asher lo avartem. You didn't serve Hashem b'simchu b'tuv levov. You did not serve him with joy and with good-heartedness. Therefore what? But we did the mitzvahs. No. Because if you don't serve Hashem with simcha and tuv levov, it's just a question of time before you stop serving him. You know, I've done it long enough. Rabbi, I've studied my 5 minutes today. How much do I have to study? Rabbi, I've heard the sermon before. I've heard the shir. I went to yeshiva. Whatever. But that's only because it's diukma yishana. It's an old proclamation. You don't see the new thing in it whenever you approach it and whenever you engage in it. So what determines whether something is seen as a new proclamation. Old proclamation, he says, Ivdu as Hashem b'simcha kiroi l'chol oved bi'avo. Which is appropriate. Anybody who serves Hashem with love, it's always Ivdu as Hashem b'simcha. Because always you see that as that moment of opportunity and privilege, and therefore you have that level of excitement. Then he says, the Torah tells us, B'chol mishlach yedchem asher atem v'votechem. He says, Ki oz tatzlichu es darkechem, oz taskilu. Because then, in all your endeavors, you will succeed, oz taskilu. And then you'll have understanding. The Rambam in Hilchos Deis writes that a person is able to serve Hashem 24 hours a day. Even when you sleep, when you eat, when you cohabit, every aspect of your life is able to be a mitzvah. How? That if you do it for the sake of Hashem, you eat to be healthy, you sleep to be re-energized, to be able to continue to serve Him. You have children to raise them as Ovdei Hashem. They should be God's servants. So therefore, there's nothing in your life which you invest that can be the most mundane physical action, but if it's done for the sake of Hashem, it's considered a mitzvah. So a person could actually live his life, and that's Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. You live every moment of life, you see as opportunity that you're able to serve Hashem. It's like a person who's he lives to make that holy dollar. Every opportunity that he has to do another deal, he has excitement, lahavdil. Every moment of life is precious because you're able to serve Hashem. You know, the Yesod v'Shesh Avoda, which I quote throughout the year, the Vilna Gaon referred to him, his name was Rabbi Alexander Ziskind. That was his name. Lived the same time as the Vilna Gaon. The Vilna Gaon referred to him as a chassid. And the Vilna Gaon was a misnagid, you understand. Chassid, we're talking the chassid of the Mesilas Yesharim. He was that type of chassid. He wrote a work, it's called Yesod v'Shesh Avoda. This is all based on the Zohar. It's the Tefillah, the weekday, the Shabbos, the Yom Tiv, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the Regolim, everything. So there he writes that when he would hear that a Jewish child was born, he'd have tremendous joy. He didn't even know whose child was, but if a Jewish child was born into existence, he had tremendous joy, great excitement. Why? Because he said another soldier was born into God's army to serve Hashem. And that would be his excitement. He'd be ecstatic. Another person comes into existence to serve Hashem. It's phenomenal. You know, it's like a person goes, I'm not into sports, but they had a pitcher, and one team, they bought that pitcher, they took him from another team. This is Alan's type of language. And this guy's the star, he's going to win the World Series for them. All the teammates, they're excited. They got the star on the team. They're excited because he's going to hit the grand slam or pitch. He's going to put the other team out of business. Shut him out. So if you have a child that he's going to come in, another Jewish child to serve Hashem, which is ultimately every moment, how could you not be excited? But that's the way the Yesod v'Shesh Avoda would experience these good tidings, hearing that a Jewish child was born into existence.